Hello lovely, you're most likely watching this because your child or newborn or baby has just been diagnosed with hip dysplasia, and now I know how you feel. My daughter Juno was diagnosed with hip dysplasia when she was just 4 weeks old, and she was in a Pavlik harness for 12, nearly 13 weeks. In this video, expect to hear some advice from one parent to another who has been through this. Some kind words, some tips and tricks, and some insider knowledge, if you will, just to help you get through it, to make your baby the most comfortable that they can be, and also to look after yourself. That's pretty much all I want to bring, because I know when Juno was diagnosed with hip dysplasia, I got straight on YouTube, I went straight onto Facebook, and I was researching and trying to find people that were in the same position, trying to find ways that I could make her comfortable, trying to find clothes, all of this information. So expect to hear all of that stuff in this video. Firstly, and most importantly though, we are going to start with you as the parent, and I just want to say your feelings right now are completely valid, and do not feel guilty whatsoever for feeling the way that you feel. I think I probably cried for about 4 days, almost non-stop, when Juno was diagnosed with hip dysplasia. It was such a shock. I kind of thought that it was just like a formality that they were kind of checking, and that it was just one of those things that like 99% of people kind of just sent away, like, oh, this isn't a problem, like we're just going to check anyway, just for peace of mind. But I just didn't know. I was naive. I went to the appointment naive, and I got sent away with my tiny baby in a Pavlik harness, which was just heartbreaking. And I felt really upset, and also just like initially I felt like it could damage Juno's and my relationship, because I had to completely relearn things. I was sort of just finding my flow with breastfeeding, and we were like really comfortable with each other, and you know, the way that you cuddle your baby, and everything felt like it had changed, and it was really hard, and it wasn't a change that I was expecting at all, and I felt really unprepared, and it really emotionally affected me. So if it is emotionally affecting you, if you are really upset about this, that is okay, and it won't last forever. In a few days, you're going to feel a lot brighter about it, I promise. Just keep the people around you that love you and support you and love your baby. They do not care. People do not care if your baby is in a Pavlik harness or any kind of harness. They just want to see them, and they just want to love them, give them all the cuddles. So let go of all of the guilt that you're feeling as a parent, because your baby probably, definitely isn't in pain. I was reassured at our appointment that it wasn't painful or uncomfortable. It might be sort of taking some time to adjust to being in it as the baby, but apparently being in it isn't painful and it isn't uncomfortable. So I was kind of repeating that knowledge to myself and just thinking, you know, this is temporary. This isn't something she's going to be in forever. It isn't painful. I need to put my feelings to one side and acknowledge them, definitely, and process them, but at the same time focus on my baby. So that kind of takes me on to my next thing, which is feeding positions. So I just touched on this briefly a minute ago when I was rambling on about making sure that you're looking after yourself and acknowledging your feelings. So feeding positions, this was probably one of my biggest struggles at the beginning. I am quite a large breasted lady, and breastfeeding anyway was kind of not awkward, but I had to just experiment with different positions because my daughter would literally suffocate under my breast. So I was experimenting with different positions before she was in her harness, and then she was in her harness. I was like, oh my gosh, this changes everything all over again. So one thing that I found worked really well was putting her sort of upper body on a pillow. I've tried to find some pictures. These are kind of the best ones that I've got, but I'll try and explain to you now what I'm doing. So I've got her upper body on a pillow, and then one of her legs in the harness is kind of between my legs. So my legs are open and her leg is through there, and the other one's kind of poking up. So that was quite a comfortable one. Another one was her kind of me reclined and my daughter lying sort of across me and feeding in that position. That worked really, really well. And then we also did some sit-up sort of breastfeeding where I had to support her back and her head because she was still quite small, but that worked well as well. So those were kind of the positions that I was going to. And then as time went on and the longer that she'd been in it, I sort of felt more comfortable feeding her while she was in it. So I didn't necessarily need the pillow, or I could kind of wiggle my arms around in a certain position and hold her, and she was comfortable and I was comfortable. So it will get better. It does feel a little bit weird at the beginning, and it's an adjustment trying to get used to them sort of feeding with that. And yeah, it's not the most comfortable thing for everyone involved, but it will get better, and you can continue to breastfeed, feed in whatever way you're feeding. So that doesn't affect the baby at all. So that's really important. So we have spoken about breastfeeding. Now let's talk about sleep. So this is something that we struggled with because we were swaddling Juno. It wasn't like an actual swaddle. It was a kind of zip up one that's like shaped in like a weird star shape. But when we got her home from the hospital, we realised that she wouldn't fit in her swaddle because there wasn't enough leg room. So I immediately went on the internet and was like, is there anything for sleep for babies that are in a Pavlik harnesses? And there is. So we got our hands on the Love to Dream sleep swaddle that is sort of hip healthy, and it's got all of this mass of room at the bottom. So I'll put a picture up of it here now. This is the sleep swaddle that you want to get a couple of them if you're using swaddles so that you can alternate between the two. They were really great. They also have detachable arms, so if your baby prefers to sleep arms out, then that's great. You can kind of use it as a sleep sack instead. I would really recommend this. It really helped keep her cozy, keep her warm and comfortable in the night, so she wasn't sort of having the startle reflex with her arms, like her arms were still in, but it also wasn't restricting the harness or restricting her legs, and that was really important for us. So definitely check that out. I'll say now as well that everything that I chat about that we bought will be linked in the description down below. So after the swaddle, we then experimented with some sleep comfort, and this isn't recommended, so do it at your own risk. I guess there's probably not much risk involved at all. But when Juno was put in the Pavlik harness, I was online and I was researching ways to make them more comfortable because their legs sit a little bit higher, like their feet don't touch the mattress. So I was thinking, you know, that's going to be really uncomfortable with her legs hanging there like that. So I went on this blog. This blogger had written about her experience with her daughter in a Pavlik harness, and she said that for the first few nights she rolled up a towel or like a thin blanket or whatever and almost created like a ring underneath her daughter's legs. So you can see in the picture that it just kind of gives something for their feet to rest on. Now, I don't know if that's recommended or not recommended, but it did help the first few nights. When she was laying without it, she was quite uncomfortable, so it kind of just took the pressure off, I think, and eventually we didn't use it at all after a few days, but it just kind of maybe made me feel a little bit more comfortable about it, and I think it made her feel more comfortable. But I mean, she was 4 weeks old, so she couldn't have told me anyway. But that's one thing that we did that I would recommend doing, and I think is a good piece of advice. That's why it's in the video. So we'll move on to clothes now. So in the UK, we have a shop called M&S that do Pavlik harness friendly clothes, which are great. I didn't actually use any of them. I personally preferred to just continue to buy normal clothes, but in a size up. So Juno was quite a big baby and she was 4 weeks old, but was in 0 to 3 months. So basically, as soon as she went in the Pavlik harness, none of the 0 to 3 month stuff fit her, and we went up to 3 to 6 months. So it was a little bit looser on top, but it just had that room over the leg to just do up the poppers, and that was the most comfortable thing for her. So that's what we went for. Now, I did read a piece of advice from, I think, a Facebook group, which I'll touch on later, that the harness actually acts as a sort of layer of clothing. So depending on what time of year or what the weather is in your country or area that you live in, just be mindful that they might overheat if they've got kind of like a vest, a sleep suit, a jacket on. So we were just having her in sleep suits with the harness underneath so this would have been March to May time. So in May, when it was a bit warmer, we had her in less clothes, obviously. But when it was cool, we had just the harness and just the sleep suit, and then obviously extra stuff when we went outside. But yeah, just be mindful of that the harness acts as a layer of clothing, because it's got the feet and the boots and stuff, and it just keeps them a little bit warmer. So yeah, thought I'd add that in. Next up is get a second harness from your physio or practitioner if you can. So we were really lucky with this. Juno was in her first harness that was fitted at the very first appointment that we went to when she was diagnosed. She was in that 24/7 for 2 weeks. We could not take it off. Even if she had accidents, we had to just wipe it clean, and that was that. However, when we went to the second appointment 2 weeks later to have it refitted, they put her in a new harness. So I was thinking, like, what's the deal? And they said, go home and wash that harness, bring that harness back, and we'll put her in that one in 2 weeks' time. So what I was doing was I was asking the physio at the appointment if she could put both harnesses to the right, because they have to change, they adapt the lengths of the straps, which is what keeps their legs in place. And they do that every 2 weeks. And that's otherwise the harness should get smaller and smaller as your baby grows. So I would say to the physio, can you change the straps and make it the right size, like the same size as the one that she's currently wearing, so that if she has an accident and soils the whole harness, which happened a few times, probably more than 5, I don't think I could count on one hand, because I mean, baby nappies are very wet. Anyway, so we always had a backup. So if she did soil it really badly, I could chuck it in the sink with some warm water and some soap and stuff and let it soak, rinse it, give it a good scrub. And she had another one to put on that was the right size. And that was really great. I think for the first few weeks, actually, we didn't do that. And then it kind of clicked in my head and I was like, actually, I'm going to do that next time we go. And it was really helpful. So definitely do that. If you've got 2 harnesses, ask whoever you're dealing with to put your second harness to the same sort of measurements as the one that your child is wearing, because then you've got a backup if you need it. So now we're going to lightly touch on washing the baby and some plasters that I found were really helpful. So when you wash the baby, if they're in it 24/7, you're going to just wash them with a damp cloth, so you can sort of not manipulate, but move their legs in a certain position so that you can get in the creases, because it's the creases of skin where the flesh is rubbing, where they will get sort of really sore, that basically the flesh comes off and they get sores behind their knees, under their armpits, and like in the cracks around their nappy area. So that was really hard and really stressful, because we didn't know that they were there until the first time that the harness was taken off. And then they said to us like, oh, well, you can have her out of it for an hour a day now, so it might not be as bad. But basically the physio that we saw put these amazing plasters on the sores that Juno had. They stayed on for like weeks, like not weeks, but I think at least 10 days the plaster stayed on her skin, and they were like a second skin plaster. I've got the name of them, I'll have a look now. They were called Hydraseal plasters. Again, I'll link these in the description down below. I would definitely recommend you can cut them to size and just place them over the sores that your baby has, and it just stops any of the skin sort of rubbing together. I'd really recommend getting those. We used them a few. The physio gave us some to take home as well, so that was really good. So damp flannel in all of the creases, but make sure that you dry them and they are bone dry, because that will make the sores even worse / bring more. If you haven't even had them, like, they'll definitely get them if you leave them wet. So definitely make sure that they're dry all the way through and you've got the plasters in case you need them. So another problem that we faced with Juno being in the Pavlik harness was that we struggled with burping. So obviously babies under a certain age, I'm not sure what the exact age is, can't wind themselves. They use their legs and their arms and they wriggle around, and that's how they burp and let out wind. But if your legs are in a Pavlik harness, you can't move them. So you can't burp yourself or wind yourself very well at all. So we were finding that Juno was getting really, really upset because she had wind pain. Once Juno was allowed out of her harness, we would sometimes incorporate doing the bicycle legs. So you've probably seen it on TikTok, Instagram. If your baby has trapped wind, you can kind of move their legs in a bicycle motion, like they're riding a bike, and that lets out gas, which is really good. And we did that probably most days that once she was allowed out of the harness for an hour a day. So that was definitely really good. Another thing that we used when she was having sort of like a big bottle, so she has a bottle before bed. Before that bottle, we would give her Infocol. So there's probably different alternatives depending on where you are in the world. But basically what it is it's something that groups together gas so that it's easier for them to bring it up as a burp rather than a fart. And we found that really helpful as well. So we were kind of using that as and when we thought we needed it, but that was really good. So again, links in the description if you need them. And lastly, we're going to talk about support. So this is really important because I didn't feel like there was loads of support out there for people that were going through it. And the only place that I found other people going through it was on one Facebook group. So I will put the link to that Facebook group in the description down below so that you can go and check it out. It was so helpful. I had so many questions. I think the first thing I posted on there was about carrying my baby because I was so used to carrying her in the baby carrier. I was thinking, how is this going to affect this? Like, is there going to be a problem? Do I need to get a different sling? Do I need to use a different carrier? And I asked all of those questions, and actually the most lovely people, like 3 different people messaged me and said, like, I know this person that lives in the UK, she lives in Brighton, message her, she has really good support with sling carrying. There's these services available, and they were so helpful, and I honestly couldn't have been more grateful. That's probably one of the reasons that I cried so much, because the people in that group were just so helpful and so understanding. Everyone on that hip dysplasia Facebook group is on it because their child has hip dysplasia, so they know exactly how you feel. So I found that really important and really beneficial to be on that group. I also asked questions about clothes, which is when someone recommended just buying the size up rather than the hip dysplasia clothes, because they can't move their legs anyway, so they're not gaining much from being in those extra wide clothes. So you might as well just buy stuff in the hope that it will still fit them when they're out of the harness, which it did for us, which was great. But yeah, join the Facebook group. It really helped me get my head around Juno's diagnosis, hearing other people go through it, hearing other people's stories, and also that seeing the success stories, the people that's babies were out of their harnesses, that had surgery. We are yet to find out if Juno needs to have surgery. We'll find out at the end of the month, end of November. So I will do an update on that, which will be a really hard experience if she has to have surgery. It will absolutely break my heart. But everything with hip dysplasia is temporary. The harness is temporary. If they need to have surgery and be in a cast, that is also temporary. It's heartbreaking to see your child go through this. It's absolutely heartbreaking when you can't take it away and you just wish that you could. You'd do anything. But it is temporary and it will be over at some point. And that's what I have to keep reminding myself about, and hopefully our appointment will go well at the end of November and Juno won't need surgery and her hips are hopefully still healthy. I really hope, but it's out of our control, so we will just wait and see. But I just want to round up this video by saying, if you need to jump in the comments because you're having a hard time, please do. I would love to chat to you about this and just be there for you. I'm also on Instagram if you want to come and chat in my DMs. It's a little bit more personal and private. I would love to help you, and you're not alone in feeling the way that you're feeling. Remember, this is temporary and you will get through it and it will be fine. In the end, everything will be fine. Lots of love. Bye.